We're gonna have a listen to a conversation. I don't know about you, but I'm already excited about what I'm gonna hear. I think you should keep Andre and Werner apart. Yeah. So Johan Erasmus is gonna. They're gonna have hard talk with Johan Erasmus, and he's gonna facilitate the discussion, and then we'll give them a couple of minutes and spare enough time for you to be able to ask questions. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Tulani. Thank you guys so much from my side. I know everybody's been thanking you and apologizing and thanking again. But from my side, thank you and my apologies. Last night we had this experiment with Itai talking to the black panel, and it was kind of cool because it was a bunch of white people looking in on a black conversation. And it's kind of weird because we're just sitting there watching this movie where these guys are talking to one another. So we thought of emulating that just a little bit, but I promise that I will get off the stage very quickly so that you guys can ask your questions and make these guys earn their water. So I just want to first of all ask you, Johan, you spoke first. You started off by saying that in 1994 it wasn't a compromise, it was justice. But you also mentioned that it was only the beginning. So my question to you would be, what do you reckon is the destination of justice?
Well, I don't think it's so much a question about destination of justice. I think it's a question of achieving equality, which in itself is an unachievable goal. There's no society in the world that's purely equal. It's unachievable. And you can aspire to it. You can aspire to creating equal opportunity. But that is what we're missing, that aspiration to achieve a society that is equal in a sense, based on restorative justice, based on equality for all. The default of our constitution is equality. There's certain mechanisms to create that equality, but the default is equality, and we tend to miss that sometimes. We tend to think of equality as only meaning one thing, and that would exclude necessarily a big part of South Africans. I think if you can elaborate on that, but that would certainly be my point on that.
All right, cheers. Werner, the villain, the AfriForum guy, one of the attempts for the Real Talk events is to put faces and names to organizations. So the next time you're very annoyed with AfriForum or Solidariteit, at least you know there's one guy who's wearing a suit that's too big for him, and he's trying to. It's a good thing he lost a lot of weight recently. Maybe he was nervous about tonight, but one of the purposes is to see that there are real people behind organizations and behind the news, and that's really important to us. You do not necessarily have to agree with Werner or AfriForum, but you have to at least see that it's people, most of them. Now, Werner, my question would be, given the perception that a lot of people have of AfriForum and Solidariteit, constitutionally, it makes a lot of sense. But I've heard smart people say once that it's not only about the letter of the law, but the heart of the law as well. And both of you guys were continuously referring to the Constitution. But sometimes I think a lot of black people and some white people as well are skeptical because they think that, aren't you guys hiding behind the Constitution to be exclusive? How would you respond to that?
I would firstly say I think it's a fair question. I think it's a fair thought of many to raise the issue of exclusivity. Is it exclusive? Is it not? I think it would depend on how you define exclusivity. If you define exclusivity as meaning Afrikaans, for example, language, you've spoken a lot of Afrikaans tonight, Afrikaans in language in the public sphere, if that is exclusivity, then yes, if your definition of exclusivity is Afrikaans in the public domain, then it is exclusive. But certainly not. I don't think we are using the Constitution to hide behind anything else. What we are doing is we are using the Constitution, and it's never, when you further your causes, it's never exclusive for one group. You're never asking for a separate portion or separate this. It's always just a place for Afrikaans. And if you look at the bigger spectrum, I think we can defend and we can justify that position. For example, when we speak about Afrikaans universities, we have, I think, 24 universities, 36 campuses, and there are 2 campuses out of all those campuses where a sustainable Afrikaans language is possible, and not in an exclusive manner, just in a manner so that it can exist sustainably. So I won't say it's exclusive, but I do think it's a fair comment.
All right. Speaking like a true spokesperson. Thank you, Van. Andre, of all the speakers, you got the most amens and hallelujahs. So
It's a charismatic church, after all.
yeah. So you're a little bit boring, to be honest. But one of the things you mentioned is a little bit about the Afrikaans history, and one of the purposes here is to help these guys, and we apologize for the fact that you have to listen to us, understand this a little bit better. And you said something about the Afrikaans history that I think is very relevant to South Africa, and that is the fact that the Afrikaans people, when they started out, felt very inferior about themselves towards the other white English people. You guys would acknowledge this. It was called kitchen Dutch. Afrikaans people were considered not to be very hygienic. I'm not sure whether that's changed, but that was the view, at least. And there was no doubt that a lot of Afrikaans people, even if their names were Andre van Zyl, would try to speak English to sound smart because they don't want to speak Afrikaans. And I think, given that history, it's kind of interesting that the Afrikaans people are now considered to be the snobs. How would you respond to that?
I did bath this morning, so I actually showered. So now I'm clean, Johan, if that's what you're asking. Sure, Johan. I find it very difficult to speak on behalf of Afrikaners. Once again, although I'm very opinionated about this, but I do think what I said about us being newly rich is an interesting phenomenon. If I just go back 2 generations in my own family, in terms of level of education, if you go back 100 years, or 150 years, the important people in Afrikaans communities were the pastors and the teachers, because they could read and write. Okay, that's where things were 150 years ago. If you go back 100 years from now, or 100 years ago, I just spoke about that it was just after 2 wars that they had both lost against the English, where the second one had a scorched earth policy where all the farms were burnt and everything was stolen and broken down, and they had just lost this second war. And one of the things I really appreciate is if you go to the Apartheid Museum, if you haven't been to the Apartheid Museum, you should go, because you can see the fairness of the museum is in the build-up to that. That a group of people, if you press them hard enough, you push them together, which is a good thing in many senses, but you also push them towards protecting themselves and pulling themselves in a specific direction. So Afrikaners did become the snobs, but even amongst Afrikaners, if you go to Bloemfontein, now you can't find a much more Afrikaans city than that. They will tell you exactly where the dividing line is between the classy people and this side of the tracks. All the professors stay over there, and all the important people stay over there, and the rest stay over here. So, I don't know if I'm answering your question at all, but I think there are historical roots to why this is so. And to be honest, I think with many people, no, I don't know if I should say that, but I think with many people, it actually speaks to a lack of real identity. It's a way of making themselves be somebody really important. That's just my opinion.
And then the last question, which is kind of the trick pony we get to really stir things up, and that is the what's it in English? The A word, affirmative action. So if you read an Afrikaans newspaper, that is how they sell newspapers. They tell us who benefited from affirmative action, and then we go and read it, and we stir ourselves up, and we go to the braaivleis and we complain about it, and then we go to sleep. But what are your views with respect to affirmative action? I want to start with you, Afriforum man. How I know it's a broad question, but I'll interrupt you when I think you're going off track.
Sure. I think the word is not actually affirmative action. The word is transformation. That's the big word and the big debate word. How I view it, of course, it needs to be acknowledged that there is reform and redress necessary in this country, without a doubt. But it's all about how is it being done. What am and that's where the debate is. It's not about the concept that there must be something to change. It is all about the how, and that's where we and I personally also have a problem with that. And if I can just say a few things on how it is done now, we are, and this is of referring positions as well. We are in favor of a position of building up, of going to communities which were disadvantaged. For example, let's take sport. Sport is a fantastic way to build a nation, to bring people together, to enlighten and inspire young people, and to go to those communities and help them with that. That's the way we believe a positive transformation is going to the communities and changing and inspire individual lives so that they can strive to be more. What we are opposed to is, in a sense, a government imposing certain strict racial quotas and call it transformation. For example, if you have the National Democratic Revolution and you look at the outcomes, the outcomes they would wish to achieve, it is solely solely a race-based proposition of a 90% black, 10% white, roughly proposition right through every aspect of society. What we are saying and what I'm saying is that proposition we do not agree with, to solely address issues of transformation on a absolute race-based proposition. Now, Solidarity, the movement at the Renata Barnard case in the Constitutional Court, unfortunately they lost, but that was the test about the absolute race-based quota. We do not believe also it's good for nation building. It's not, it creates a tension amongst groups. It destroys any form of diversity. I mean, as soon as you have, we spoke about universities tonight, or I did, and Afrikaans tonight, it destroys every argument for that. If you say we are transformed, and that's what I also want to think, and maybe the other speakers can elaborate, how would you see a transformed South Africa? When would you say, do we have a transformed South Africa? Do we have a transformed South Africa when we have simply a 90%, 10% ratio in every aspect of I don't think so. I think we are a transformed South Africa when all the ideals of the Constitution have been met and all groups and communities in the country has a place to live and live freely without any form of restriction.
All right. If you can pass that on to Johan. Johan, just a nuance that I want to give you is I've heard a lot of Afrikaans, a lot of white people in South Africa are scared with respect to affirmative action. Not that they think it's a bad idea, but it was designed to help a minority group. But in South Africa, it's the one place where the majority are controlling and benefiting from affirmative action, and that's potentially dangerous. Would you like to comment on that?
Well, let me first say, of course they would be scared. Because all of a sudden, after 94, they have to compete with everyone in South Africa. Before 94, a white South African walked into a job. It was your choice whether you want to go to public service or you had a job, full stop. After 94, all of a sudden, the competition got much wider. Of course they will be scared. The point is, the Constitution requires restorative justice. We are a hugely unequal society because of the past. I don't need to go into the detail of that. It requires and it allows for measures to correct. It doesn't speak of transformation, though. I made mention of it earlier tonight. It speaks of correcting the wrongs by means of helping those who were previously disadvantaged. So that's the first point. There's no doubt about the fact that we need to effect restorative justice. We must create opportunities that are equal, and we must assist those that's not equal to become equal so that they can benefit from equal opportunities. The second point, however, and I think that's where we get into the debate in South Africa at the moment, is how do we do that? And how we do that goes hand in hand with the notion of fairness. And for argument's sake, if you have to look at Patrice Motsepe's kids today, would you deem them disadvantaged? If you look at Cyril Ramaphosa's kids today, do you deem them disadvantaged? How do they compete with the kid in the shack in Khayelitsha, in Gugulethu, in Diepsloot? After 20 years, we have a realm where the question of fairness and who is disadvantaged is completely different than we've had 20, 25 years ago. It's a debate we need to have again, and determining how do we diminish class division? How do we diminish those that after 20 years still live in a shack? How do we create an opportunity for them to become equal? I would argue that the policies in place at the moment has benefited a very small minority of the majority, whether through black economic empowerment, whether through affirmative action or other race-based policy transformation action plans, we haven't achieved what was set out to achieve. We have to have that conversation again and determine whether we're still using the right strategies. That we have to have a strategy to affect proper restorative justice is no choice. That's no question. We don't have to have that discussion. That's a constitutional requirement. How we do that is I think, what we
Thanks, Johan.
need to sit down again.
Andre, we're running out of time, so I'm not going to ask you that question because you're probably just going to quote the Bible or something. So I'm going to hand over to Tulani to field some questions.